My name's Arthur Griffin, and I suppose how I come to know so many of you and how I come to be involved in these commemorations is through politics. But I think on a day like today, one of the marvellous things about 1916 is that it transcends the politics of all the modern day political parties, of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, of the Labour Party, their involvement through the Irish Citizens Army, through Provisional Sinn Féin and the Workers' Party, etc. They've all come along, and the wonderful thing about 1916 is that, you know, perhaps the War of Independence, because of the Civil War, causes us to be a little bit divided in our history. But the marvellous thing about 1916 is that we can all look at that tricolour, and I can say this honestly, that it is a tremendous source of pride to think that we have that flag, and that flag is flying here. And I can only imagine that for the gentlemen who are buried here, it must be somewhere in heaven's bed that they are absolutely so proud to think that our tricolour is flying, and our flag, which in itself says so much, the peace between Catholic and Protestant, the unity of the whole island. So just to say a brief word about the history of the event. W.B. Yeats in 1913 wrote his famous September 1913 poem, where he was at this point in time disgusted with Ireland. You know, the famous line we all know it from school: "Romantic Ireland is dead and gone, it's with O'Leary in the grave." He no longer had faith in the Irish people. Yeats, by this point in time, had been converted to nationalism, if maybe not quite republicanism, and he was disgusted at the way that the Irish society had gone, and he had lost faith in the Irish people. But by 1916, he would famously write, "All changed utterly." And what was the difference? The difference was simple: that those who were behind 1916 were idealists. They had a vision, they had a dream, they were romantics, they were poets. They weren't politicians, they weren't soldiers. They fought, and they fought politically and they fought militarily. But in real terms, if you compared it to the various men buried here, to Breen and to Tracy, and to those who would eventually succeed in the 1919 to 1922 war, those guys and those women were really good soldiers, clever militarily, who were ruthless and who were efficient and who did the job, and ultimately that's why we have that flag. But by 1916, there were some terrible military mistakes made in 1916. The occupation of Stephen's Green and College Green, was a disaster. The GPO was a disaster. But what is the significance? It is the wonderful ideals that they set forward in that proclamation. And it was my second time hearing the proclamation today, and fair play to Dennis, he did a really good job in it, but I could listen to it 100 times. The language in it is absolutely fantastic. The ideals that they set forth are absolutely fantastic. And I would call on our government that they would introduce, and it might cost a small bit of money, but if there is a referendum to be held between now and 1916, I would call on them to include a referendum to include that the proclamation be recognised in the Constitution as a founding document of the state. I think it is a marvellous set of ambitions, and it is a marvellous set of ideals. In 1966, Eamon de Valera, the last surviving leader of the 1916 Rising, gave his famous speech on the 50th anniversary, where he spoke of the Ireland which we dreamed of. And the Ireland which we dreamed of that he spoke of was one whereby it was based not just on economic values, and sometimes, and look, there's no doubt you have to keep the wolf from the door and you have to keep the bread on the table, but he said Ireland was about more than just economics. Ireland was about culture. It was about our games. It was about our heritage. It was about, people engaging in community spirit. And I think the very fact that all of you are here today is a sign that succeeds. The very fact that we have, hurling being played above in the stadium today, Tipperary and Clare, and football as well, but not just our own domestic games. And I'm sure Michael would only want me to talk about the GA, but in fairness,
choose me, I wouldn't. I support Otto.
Well, fair play to you, Michael.
And one of the fellas came out first and said the Crow Park should be opened.
Absolutely, and that's the point, though, lads. That anything that we engage in terms of soccer, rugby, anything that we engage in as a community, that's what we were pushing as a nation, and it's undoubtedly, economically, our country made an awful lot of mistakes, and probably is continuing to do so. But they were our mistakes to make. Ultimately, it was our choice to elect the people that made these mistakes. It wasn't being imposed on us by another country. There's a story, when I was doing my own thesis for my master's, I remember coming across a story whereby one of the Irish MPs, as they were at the time in Westminster, tried to raise the issue of local government, funnily enough, in Tipperary. And the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the United Kingdom literally said, "We don't have time to be talking about issues over there." So, I mean, that it was only natural that, aside from any natural burning spirit of freedom and desire that we would have, it was only natural that if they were going to govern us badly, they were going to get their answer. And as it says in the proclamation, so many times over the hundreds of years, they were given it. But I think why 1916 has such resonance is because of that document, because of the proclamation that it makes, that we would cherish all the children equally. And I would be very critical, and maybe it's not popular to say, I would be very critical of what went on in the Troubles in terms of the Provisionals campaign, because it does say, and in particular after the Troubles, with Oma and so forth, it says at the end of that wonderful document that the cause would not be dishonoured by inhumanity. And I think there were some very inhumane acts caused during that time, but history moves on, and I think it is fair to say that as a nation, all parties coming together now are working together for the betterment of our country. And I believe that by 2016 we may not have a united Ireland, but I reckon by 2116 we will have an island where everybody is united. And that does not just mean government in Dublin for all the people. It means for the people, whatever their tradition, Catholic and Protestant, Anglo-Irish, and let's not forget there were some Anglo-Irish people involved in it, such as Casement, etc., that all those people will be unified under the Irish cause. I would finally say that I thank the third Brigade and all involved in it. I think that it is very important that historical societies continue to commemorate these events, because we learn from our history. We can't stay stuck in the past, no one is saying that, but by remembering our past, we learn and we remember that what we have is precious to us. Time does move on. Sean Lamass was 15 years of age when he lay on top of the GPO for 3 days during 1916, and Lamass was the first to say that we needed to move on. Lamass was the one who went into the north and met with Terence MacNeill. Lamass was the one who suggested that Ireland needed to open up and join the European Economic Community as it was at the time. And time does move on, but the basic message that I suppose these gentlemen here and those in 1916 had, as I say, that they be our own mistakes to make. Well, let us make our mistakes and let us make our successes, but let us always do so in the memory of those who have gone before us. And on a personal note, I'd just like to mention the fact that I was taught history by a man from this town when I was in secondary school, James O'Donoghue, and J.O. passed away when I was doing my leaving cert. He's buried here. He was only a young man at the time. He's buried in this ground, and I'd just like to remember him at this time, because it was very much J.O. who gave me the sense of importance that Tipperary in particular played in the War of 1919 to 1922, and I suppose the Civil War as well. And if one is to ever look at a timeline of the War of Independence, it would fill you with pride that you're from the Premier County when you read that every third and fourth battle that was fought during that war was fought here. And you know, Neil Jordan, when he made that film Michael Collins, which of course is so historically inaccurate, it's funny, but when he made that film, he made you think that it was all won in Dublin, but it was won in the fields of Tipperary, in the hills of North and West Cork and Limerick and places like that, and it was won, as Michael said, by people fighting in weather like this with probably not much clothes and not a whole pile of weaponry to them and not a whole pile of arms. So I think that we should just be able to stop and pause, and I close with the line from the song The Boys of the Old Brigade, because I think it is a sign of our real pride. Oh Father, why are you so sad on this bright Easter morn, when Irish men are proud and glad of the land where they're born? And as I said, as we be proud and glad that that tricolour is flying here today. Gurv Níl Amagad
An uplifting speech for all of us, and coming from a young